The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to How to Mount Cases to Estimate Adjustable Articulator Using a Facebow Record. My name is Sarah and I'll be facilitating the webinar today. Before we begin, I just want to go over a few things. If you have any questions, please put them in the questions box which is on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be answering all questions at the end of the webinar. This course has been approved for 1 NVC credit. We will be sending an email out at the end of the webinar with information on how to obtain the credit. In addition, we are recording the webinar, so you can watch it at a later time, and we'll also send that link out to you as well. Now I'd like to introduce to you Craig Pickett. Craig is our technical support manager here at Whitmix and has over 30 years in the dental laboratory. So without further ado, Craig.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this installment of our webinar set. This topic is something that shows up in the dental laboratory on rare occasion, and it's kind of too bad that it does that. I think most of us who've been at this quite a while recognize that we rarely get Facebow records from our general practice dentists. There may be 1 or 2 that do it quite often, but it's pretty rare. Most of the time when I had a case that was to be mounted to a semi-adjustable articulator, the prescription would simply come in saying, mount to big articulator. No records, no instructions on condylar guidance, nothing, just mount to big articulator. Well, there are some advantages to that, even when we go to general settings, but it's much better if we have some kind of record. Now, preferably, we'd like to have lots of records. We'd like to have a Facebow record, we'd like to have a protrusive record, we'd like to have lateral movement records, but we just simply don't get that. And so, on the occasion that we do get a Facebow record, we want to know how we're going to deal with it. So let's go ahead and launch into this, shall we? All right. So first of all, I'm going to go here, and why should I be using a Facebow? The reason is because we need to find that position of the mandible relative to the maxilla. And if we don't have that position locked in, then when we go to our articulator, everything is arbitrary. And we know that we can get relatively close using Bonwell and a few other things if we have some kind of a mounting stand that lets us know where that is. Otherwise, most of our laboratory folks and many of our dentists are simply taking their casts and kind of mounting them in the middle of the articulator somewhere. That doesn't really give us what we need. What we need is we need to have good Facebow records. Now, what does a Facebow do? The first thing is that it defines for us the plane of occlusion. Okay, now that is a plane described by that relationship between the upper and lower teeth when they're together in a natural bite. And you can see here, I'll run over here with the pointer, here's our occlusal plane that's running right through here. For some of you other folks who maybe are removable guys, there's the hip plane that you've heard talk about. But this occlusal plane we need to understand and how it relates to some kind of a horizontal level. The horizontal level that we choose is something called the Frankfurt horizontal plane. And that Frankfurt horizontal plane, there's a great definition over here to the left of the screen, but basically it runs from the auditory meatus here straight through this point here on the orbitale where the eye would be, okay, and out the front of the face. That becomes our horizontal plane. And then the relationship that we have from the occlusal plane to the horizontal plane is what we're going to describe using our Facebow. All right, so without that Facebow, once again, you're simply guessing. Maybe it's an educated guess. Maybe it's really not an educated guess. It looks pretty good when you do it on the articulator, but then everything looks good when you do it on the articulator. It's about that transfer back to the patient and whether or not it's going to function properly, your restoration is going to function properly when it goes back to the patient. Is it going to do that if all you've done is guess? And that's our problem. So we want to know how to use these records when they come in the door. Now, Facebow records are really pretty easy. And for those of you who've never taken a Facebow record, I thought we'd just kind of run through it. This is using the Slidematic Facebow. What you're going to do is there's a shaft, basically an XY axis, that is going to be attached to the actual bow. In the Slidematic, for a third point of reference, you're going to measure from the incisal edge of the lateral 43 millimeters, okay, and make a mark on the patient. All right, then what we're going to do is take a bite registration on the bite fork. You can use whatever you want. A lot of folks are using faceplate wax to do that, but there are a lot of great bite registration materials out on the market today that aren't affected by heat in the back of the trunk in the summer when it's being transported to the laboratory. So you might want to consider those kinds of things. You're going to line that bite fork so that everything looks properly aligned. And then the bite fork goes into the Facebow. Now, there are a variety of Facebows that are on the market. And those Facebows vary depending upon the type of registration that you're going to be doing. The record will vary depending upon that, whether it's a fixed or a removable. If you look over here on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a bite registration fork here, bite fork that's designed for removables, which is what this is on the left side of the screen. Now, get back to this. We assemble it. The bite registration goes into the patient's mouth. It is hooked to the transfer assembly, which is down here, and that transfer assembly is in turn tied into the Facebow itself. The earpieces are placed in the auditory meatus of the patient, and they're pulled forward to make sure that they're seated correctly. And once that's seated correctly and your pointer is on the third point of reference here on the patient's nose or close to it, then you lock the keys, either the single number 1 knob on the quick lock toggle, or if you're using a standard XY axis transfer, then you would use the number 1 and the number 2 and tighten down that XY axis. And with that, you've taken a Facebow. Now you're simply going to remove it from the patient. And now it's time to transfer it over to your articulator. So what we need to tell you here about the Whitmix style Facebow is that it uses what's called a nasion relator. So your third point of reference, rather than being measured from an incisal edge, is referenced right there at the nasion, right in between your eyes. And that holds that as the third point of reference. So first point is in the ear, second point is in the second auditory meatus, third point is the nasion. So that's where you go with the Whitmix. Now, here it is. You've got this bite registration information, and what do I do with this now? The first thing you need to know here is that there are 2 separate types of mounting to articulators. Now, this is basic general information for you. First type is direct, second type is indirect. We'll cover both of those today. Now, you need to know that each articulator system out there has its own kind of a Facebow, and they don't all cooperate together. So you need to find out, depending upon which articulator you're using, which Facebows work and which ones do not work with your articulators. So if you have a SAM or a Cavo or a Panadin or a Stratus, you're going to need to check and see what kind of transfers are available from the Facebows that are out there. Now, the Slidematic is very popular. It will transfer between the Danar, the Hanau, and the Whitmix articulators, and we'll show you how that happens in just a minute. All right, so direct mounting. The Facebow is mounted directly to the articulator. Many of you older guys have seen this. It's been around quite some time. The earpieces of the bow are attached to what are called auditory pins on the articulator. These are right in this area. We'll show you close up here. This is a classic little auditory pin on a Whitmix, and this one over here is on a Hanau. These are the pins that usually get broken because we don't know what they are, and then we try to replace them with a burr or some other instrument that will just do it. You really shouldn't be doing that. They need to come back here to the factory so that they're put in the correct position. But this is the auditory pin, and the earpiece fits on that auditory pin. Now, on some of the older Hanau Facebows, they did not fit on the auditory pin, but actually fit on what's called the condylar shaft end, which is right here. These are in the instructions of the individual Facebows. All right, now, if we're doing this direct mount, in this case, this example, we're doing it to a Whitmix articulator, you would set the condylar guide to the Facebow marking, which is the little FB that's right here on the side. Okay, that's the condylar inclination scale. It's approximately 50 degrees on the 2240, which is the Whitmix articulator. It's going to be a little different, just depending upon the individual Facebow articulator combination. Now, other articulators will have you set them anywhere from 0 to 30 degrees. You just need to check on the individual articulator and how that wants to be set up. Now, if you have Whitmix, Danar, or Hanau articulator, hopefully you've all had the information now that Whitmix owns all three of those articulator lines. If you have questions about your articulator, please don't hesitate to call us or to go online to whitmix.com, and then you can look up your individual articulators under occlusions. And all the reference material is available for you there online. All right, now, indirect mounting, the upper member of the articulator is held parallel to the Facebow, duplicating that Frankfurter horizontal plane and the relationship of the bite registration then, which is down here, to the upper member. The position is now in the correct spot that the patient was in when we first took this registration. Now, are they always going to be lined up like this over the mounting plate? The answer is no. It's going to be wherever the patient is. That measurement from that auditory meatus out to the anterior incisal edge there, the upper, is going to be different for every patient. And so you can expect that this bite registration will be forward or backward, depending upon how the patient is. The other thing that you need to know is that the Facebow only relates to the upper frame, not to the lower. So if you look at this picture right now, it looks like something's wrong. We've mounted this incorrectly. Well, we really haven't, because we're not even dealing with the lower member yet. We're only dealing with the relationship of the occlusal plane to the upper member, which is the horizontal, or in this case, the Frankfurter. All right, now, many times, once we get a model pinned and based, it becomes a little bit heavy. And so the use of a cast support, which is this little guy right here, keeps the weight of the model and the mounting stone from changing that position of the bite. It can sag a bit if you're not careful. Many times folks won't remember what this is. It is a cast support. We'll hear it called the thing with the helicopter blades. We know what that is if you call us and you're asking us about it. Now, there are different cast supports depending upon whether you have a screw type or a magnetic type of an articulator mounting. So you need to make sure you've got the correct one for that. All right, now, the maxillary model then is positioned in the bite registration material. If you feel that it's a little bit wobbly in there, make sure that you've gone in and have those teeth seated all the way into that bite registration. If you need a little extra help, you can always use a little hot glue, or a little bit of orthodontic wax will work just to hold it in place. Then you add your mounting stone and to the top of your cast, and then make sure that the upper member of the articulator is now down and flush with the crossbar, which goes across right in this area, and that will tell you that you've got your relationship correctly. Okay. Now, what I like to do is called a two-step mounting. A lot of us would love to have casts mounted that look like this, and they're usually pretty raggedy. One of the easy ways to do it is to first build a little column in the center of this area between the plate and the cast. and let that harden up. Then you can always take the cast off and add a second coat of mounting material to give you a nice, beautiful cast. All right, now once that's good and hard, then you're going to relate the lower cast using your bite registration, not the one that's on the Facebow, but a good bite registration. And then lute those two casts together, and then you're going to use mounting stone over here to mount that lower to its plate. Now there are mounting stones and mounting plasters, and the biggest difference between them is their hardness and also the expansion. Your mounting stones generally have less expansion than mounting plasters. If you're using regular laboratory plaster, you have an even higher expansion. That expansion is going to drive the not the models apart. They will remain in relationship, but it is going to open the distance between your lower and upper member of your articulator. So if you mount and you find your anterior pin has come off the table, that's probably the reason. You might want to go back to a low expansion mounting stone for this application. Okay, they're mounted, they're where they're supposed to be, and that's direct mounting of your cast using Facebow. Now, let's move on a bit to indirect mounting. In indirect mounting, the transfer assembly, now it's a little bit difficult to see right here, but it's there is your anterior pin, this black pin going down. This to the right of it, which is silver, is the transfer assembly, this whole thing. And you will remove this upper area from the Facebow. It just has a little thumb screw. You unscrew it, take it off. That then will be placed in this anterior jig or transfer table here, that's right here. This will replace then your regular anterior table on a Danar. Just slides in and then screws into the bottom. And it will put that bite fork and registration material in the same position relative to the Facebow and the upper member that it was in patient's mouth. Okay. Anterior pin gets set to 0, and then once again we go ahead and articulate to the mounting plate. Okay. Now, if you would like to use this same slide-matic Facebow in a Hanau or a Whitmix articulator, then what you need to do is you need to get the appropriate transfer base assembly. There is one for Hanau, which is noted by the H on this, and there's also one for Whitmix, which is notated over here by the W. That will allow you to use the slide-matic Facebow on a different articulator, okay, rather than the one that it was initially designed for. You will still be in the same positions. All right, now, Whitmix and Hanau also make indirect mounting opportunities for you. The Whitmix has transfer base assemblies like these, and the Hanau, for its spring bow, also has a transfer base assembly. So there are options for you here. Now, if your Facebow is an old Whitmix and it has a rigid crossbar and vertical member, then you are going to need to change that out for the system that allows you to go indirect if you'd like to do that. And we can help you with that here at Whitmix. All right, now after the maxillary cast is mounted, here you are. What we've done is we've turned the articulator upside down, and now we are going to mount that lower cast to the mounting plate that's available. The articulator that's here is the Mark 300 series articulator from Danar, and they have their own specific mounting plates that are different from the other Danar mounting plates. If you've not worked with these before, you can go once again online and take a look at that product. There you go. We've done indirect mounting then. It's very simple. We get the upper and lower mountings filled in and smoothed, and the transfer assembly is removed. The anterior table is then, this anterior table is then replaced, and you're ready to go. You are complete. It's quite a simple process if you just know what it is that you need to look for, how to make it work for you. Now, some things to remember. First of all, Facebows fit a specific series of articulators. Okay? They don't all transfer to all articulators, just like all mountings don't transfer to all articulators. Facebows will either be direct or indirect, and Whitmix Facebows can be both or converted to be both. Facebows capture the relationship between the occlusal plane and the horizontal reference, and generally that's the Frankfurt plane. Okay? Facebows use 3 points of reference to establish a horizontal plane. That's standard procedure in establishing any kind of a plane. Facebows record the anterior position of the central incisors and then also any cant that might be in the patient's bite. That would be if you were looking directly at the patient, their teeth may actually drop to the left or to the right, and that's critical. Those of you who have done a large anterior bridge before, send it off to the doctor's office to be placed, and then the doctor grinds on one side or the other and tells you the teeth are crooked. That's not because you did anything incorrectly. You just didn't have all the information. You didn't know that the patient actually had a canted bite. And when you set this up in whatever articulator you use, you went parallel with that incisal edge to the tabletop or the floor for your horizontal. And that wasn't how the patient was. So once again, a great reason to use a Facebow. All right, now Facebows do not record lateral movements. If you are going to use lateral records, the doctor has to do that individually. And lastly on my list, Facebows are simple to use and they're worth the time. We say all the time that this is something that a dental assistant can be trained to do in a very short period of time. And that if they take that Facebow prior to the time the doctor even walks in the room, right after you place the patient bib, the Facebow's done and ready to go, and you are going to love having all the information, especially if you're doing a large anterior case or a case that involves anterior teeth and posterior teeth in the same arch. Once you've changed directions, now you're working with posterior occlusion versus anterior occlusion. You have different types of movements. You can't just capture that by putting it on a little plastic articulator and hoping that you've done something correctly. All right, well, these are the things that I wanted you to remember today, and hopefully all of you who have watched are now a little more comfortable with how that works. I would suggest that you grab a Facebow if you have one. If you don't, borrow one from one of your doctors. Bring it to your laboratory and try it out. Make sure you understand how their Facebow works with your articulator. If it doesn't work with your articulator, then it's time to take a look at equipment changes so that you can be prepared for those good cases that come along. All right, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Sarah.
All right, this time I'd like to open it up for questions. But while you're all writing in your questions, I just want to remind everybody that this has been NVC approved for 1 scientific credit, and you'll be receiving an email within about 24 to 48 hours with information on how to obtain that. In addition, we will be posting a webinar on our website at whitmix.com/webinars, and we'll also include that link in the email we send you. It looks like we do not have any questions at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and end it. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.